Are we live? Yeah, I guess we are live. Hello, hello, my friends. It's very, very nice to see you tonight. I decided to skip intro for no reason today, and I'm really glad to introduce Professor Gerdes. I'm sure a lot of my viewers are also subscribed to his channel, and here he is, as promised. Hello, Professor. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. The honor is mine. And we have quite an audience here. Yeah, we are live. The sound is great, uh, which doesn't happen often. Uh, Professor, can you tell us a couple words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just a professor trying to help add some context to what's going on in the war in Ukraine and help people think critically about what they're viewing or how they're imbibing the information that they're trying to make sense of.
What was the reason for you to start following the updates from Ukraine
Mhm.
and debunk the Russian fakes that are massively produced over the years?
Yeah. So when the war first broke, oh, let me go back to the beginning. A week before the war broke, I'm sitting around in a cafeteria with some other professors, and we're all just, yeah, Putin's not going to do that. He's just trying to get concessions. It's not going to happen. And to a man, that's what we all thought, right? Then a week later, I'm at an academic conference and I'm watching the news as I'm getting dressed in the morning. Like, what happened? He invaded. He really did that, and it was very jarring to see. And then a day or two later, I hear of Zelensky saying the "I need ammunition, not a ride" line, which is great line. And I'm thinking, wait, who is this guy? Wait, that's the guy that was with Trump and I'm piecing it together because I didn't pay a lot of attention to who Zelensky was or what he was doing. Within 3 weeks, I had written a Kindle book about Zelensky's background, just like trying to understand who he is and what he's done. And like, think about this: Afghanistan or Iraq or Vietnam. Like, none of these leaders would have stood and fight. Like, they would have like, okay, I'm gonna go in exile with my, whatever kind of deal I can take, and he stood and fought. And I thought, wow, that's really impressive. We need to know more about him. So I teach leadership. I created a master's program in leadership in my university, the undergraduate program in leadership. So this is what caught my attention initially. And then I was doing a podcast that was all about leadership kind of things, and I just kept talking about Ukraine. And after a while, I started going, I have to separate this and just do this Ukraine only channel. And so 1,000 videos later, here we are, because this is what's important. And you can tell that this is what's important. And by the way, along the way, I really come to deeply appreciate Ukrainians and their mentality. When we were last talking, when we last collaborated, something clicked for me where I realized, yes, there is something in the Ukrainian. I don't know if it's culture or psyche or what it is, but that's just different. That is just like they're going to stand up and do this thing. Like, look, if they're going to stand up to that aggression, we have an obligation to support them, and that's how I became involved.
Yeah, and by the way, 1,000 videos is it's an impressive number, I must say. And I think within the past since 653 days, you obviously encountered a lot of Russian fakes. What was the craziest or cringiest one that you can remember?
There's a lot of cringy ones. So you asked in the last question before that how I started looking at debunking Russian lies. And so I guess I'm just trying to look at critical thinking and why are they saying this? So I'd read when I first started, I was just trying to give the news update, right? Like here's what's happening each day. And then I kind of niched myself into looking at, because I look at Western media and then along the same way, I'd look at RT and Pravda and TASS and like, how could you say that when this is what's happening? Like, it just the cognitive dissonance was just amazing, and it really was bad after Bucha. And this might be the cringiest one. But there are all kinds of other ones out there. Like I thought it was actually pretty clever for them to do the deep fake of Zelensky saying surrender. Like I don't want that to happen, but honestly, that was a little on the clever side for them to be able to try to pull that off. And then you had Bucha, which was terrible, and I'm going to circle back to that. You had recently this one about the two yachts, the guy out of nowhere saying two yachts, and I spent a day working out that, and then E. Seisman yachts destroyed this guy by actually looking at the documents and that kind of thing. And like the documents weren't even good. Like you have one job, like to do your propaganda, do it well. Like is that too much to ask? Or Olena Zelenska with the Cartier visit or shopping in New York, which turned out to be a fake receipt with a fake employee of a day after she had already left New York. Again, these guys aren't like you guys are supposed to be this top-notch propagandist, and yet you get these kind of details wrong. So I, the cringiest one is going to be in Bucha, and this one made me livid. When they're talking about like, see the body's moving. No, these were like legitimately. It's like mocking the dead. It was just so wrong. So it
Yeah.
was so absolutely wrong that that one just worked my Irish. Sorry, do you know what work your Irish is? So it's just a phrase like makes you mad. I'm half Irish, half German because I'm an American, and we're all mutts, right? Like that's how we roll over here. And so that's just it just made me so angry seeing that. But they do that again and again, and they lie with impunity. Like you see Western independent Western reporters on the ground, and then you see RT saying, "No, they made that up. These are just actors. Here's the evidence that it's acting," and they try to change some like hand movement, twitching or something, but they have no compunction about lying, and that's really the trick. And but that's their strength, and it's also their weakness simultaneously, and we can come talk more about that in some time.
Yeah, I completely agree. And oh my God, like mannequins, actors. Then they were passing this man on a bicycle line on the road, and they were, look, he moved in the mirror. At the same
Yeah.
time, this man was on dozens of satellite images from the same area for like a week or
Hmm.
several weeks. It was insane. But actually, yeah, the one with the yachts. Oh my God! Uh, the dude had only one video, and like the dude had like less than 100 subs.
75 at the time when I looked at it. And he had, yeah, and the next day he had 22,000 views, and the next day was 35,000 views. And it was just like, but this is the way that their propaganda works. You get one person to say something, and then you get the repeaters to spread it and spread it and spread it. And they know what they're doing when they're doing that. And so they don't need it to be officially from RT or TASS or Pravda. It's even better if it's not from there. And then you'll take people who will say it as a fact. So when I tackled Redacted, because Redacted came out and believed it hook, line, and sinker, and then said everything that Redacted would say. And see, this is more evidence of corruption. And see how like it's just like when Zelensky went on that Paris shopping spree. Okay, again, another debunked thing, but they're saying it as if it's fact. So I did my level best to hammer it. You can go back 1 week and see that video, and you'll see Redacted. That's the only place where you're going to see Redacted talking about it too, because Redacted pulled it down like the next day after E. Seisman. I don't know that I had any part in it. I mean, E. Seisman really tore them up. And you look at that, but there was no retraction to it. So this is one of the things, like they're scamming you by not being honest about what they're saying. Like, oh, I didn't say that. No, there's no evidence of that here. No, I have the evidence on my video. So yeah, it's just yeah.
It's crazy, and Redacted actually included that in their report, and they have like I think several million viewers, right? Several
Yeah,
million
and that's what I was
subscribers.
talking about beforehand. Like, it seems like the crazier you are, the more viewers you have. If you're trying to have a serious discussion or be honest or be intellectually honest about what you're talking about, it's like crickets. But you do what you can.
Yeah. The craziest one that I remember was about this search at the apartment of Zelensky's in Crimea, where they found like a purse of Elena Zelenska produced by Louis Vuitton, of course. And
Yeah.
inside the purse, there was her Russian passport that, according to the date, it was issued in like 2014 or something. But her picture in this passport was actually taken from her Facebook in like 2022 or
Yeah,
2020.
they're just
Like,
bad.
dude, you only had one job.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But here's the thing. Think about what the theme of all these attacks are. They're trying to paint a narrative that, see, Zelensky can't be trusted. Zelensky is corrupt. All Ukrainians are corrupt. You shouldn't support them. What happened just yesterday? The Russian spy chief says this is going to be, he's warning that this will be another Vietnam. Maybe for you, it won't be for us. Like
Yeah.
now, if he's warning the U.S., don't get involved because it's going to become another Vietnam. We're not losing 56,000 killed, right? That's not happening here. That's what happened in Vietnam. So, but you have to ask yourself, why is he asking? And this is a great rule of thumb. Anytime you're reading anything, why is the person saying it saying what he's saying? What's the motive? So if the Russians are saying, are they really giving us a friendly warning, like, hey, we don't want this bad thing to happen to you? Or is it because they're trying to get you to back away? They're trying to get you to back away, of course. And so looking at it through that eyes, like I go through a lot of RT or a lot of um, just Russian propaganda videos in order to say, now, why would they say this? If they're saying this, it's for a reason. They want you to believe X. And so, anyway, but you have to really critically examine it. And people early on didn't understand what I was doing, especially when I would look at Scott Ritter or Doug McGregor or those kind of guys and say, hey, you're just giving them too much airtime. No, that you need to expose this. And then you need to show how they're wrong here and there and the other place and the other place. And then you're saying, now, when they're saying this next thing, if they were wrong here and here and here and here, and they weren't willing to admit it, why should you believe them about this one? Right? I mean, that's the way you need to approach what's going on. I mean, I like NAFO with the mocking approach. I mean, I think that's really useful. But I think if you can undermine them and say they were wrong, they lied about this. Really, was there smoking on the Moskva? Is that what happened? Did they really leave Snake Island just because they wanted to show like, hey, we really care. We're just going to turn over this island. No, they were driven out. And if they're not willing to admit, and so here's the really interesting thing about that too. It's very hard to find a credible Russian source about a lot of things. But I feel fairly confident when I hear Ukrainian or Western press. Now, Western press has its issues. I get that. I'm a conservative. And so I kind of have a little bit of a mainstream media, but the mainstream media is a little biased. It's not poisoned. There's a difference between a little bias that leans to the left, and I get that, but they still have lots of facts in it. And what's your alternative? RT? That's like drinking sewage. Why would you do that? Like, that's crazy. But then we do that, or we drink it secondhand through the repeaters, like the Duran or Redacted or McGregor or whoever else. Why? It's insane. So just think through your sources. I'm sorry, I went way too long on that. I get fired up about this kind of thing.
No, no, no. I absolutely agree with you. And by the way, I also have to watch a lot of Russian propaganda because of my position. And sometimes I feel like crying in the backseat of my car for like several hours while no one is watching.
It
Uh,
hurts your head sometimes. Like sometimes I'd like people comment about this periodically. Dr. Gerdes, I don't know how you do this. And there, what you saw were the ones that I could bring out. There are some that I'm just like, even I'm not going to touch that. That's just like how. Yeah, sometimes it's just painful. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and it's zombifying. It's like actually this is the definition of brainwashing because we talked about it with Jonathan from the Silicon Cartoon,
mhm.
and he mentioned I think he mentioned the 90s, the Russian campaign in Chechnya, and like every single news report, every single uh, video or whatever footage or anything else, with the narrator
Mhm.
narrator's voice on the background, they go Chechen terrorists, Chechen terrorists,
Mhm.
Chechen terrorists. I was younger than 10 years old, I believe, because in Ukraine we had Russian television. Of course, it was available. And sometimes I would just watch Russian news on the background. And these two words, Chechen terrorists, they went so deep into my mind
Yeah.
that, and it was just in a single day, for example. I imagine, I imagine what happens to people who just keep listening to the same message like over and over and over again. This is the definition of zombification, of brainwashing.
Yeah. And here's the thing though. You have a system that's locked down where you can't get outside information. Yeah, some of the younger folks get it through a VPN, but it's the older crowd that listens to the Russian TV that's going to be most affected by it and most pining for the Soviet days and most supporting Putin, and that's statistically demonstrated. And so, like, if you if you have to lock it down, if you can't hear an alternative source, that means you don't believe your position is solid, right? Like, I
Yeah,
welcome people to challenge what I have to say. Challenge me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I can grow. Maybe I can learn. But so when you're looking at a source, if they only tolerate one position, it's probably not a safe source, even if it's the guys you agree with, right? If you're looking at a source and they're not humble and saying, I'm open to new information. That's a bad source. If you're looking at a source and the internet is locked down in that country, it's probably not a good source. I mean, it's just these. This isn't rocket science. I mean, this is pretty clear, but we have to think through this intelligently.
yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about sources, again, Russian media are not independent. They cannot
Mhm.
be
Right.
in a country that despises democracy and freedom of speech. Because in a country where people get arrested for just standing with an empty banner on the
That's
street,
right.
what kind of independent media are we talking about?
How scared do you have to be to send that woman to jail like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago for changing what, 5 tags and and that had true information that was opposed to what the state official account was. She went to jail for 5 years for saying 5 little lines about Russians' involvement in Ukraine. How
Yeah,
terrified you have to be to send someone to jail for 7 years for that. That means you don't believe your own position and you're weak. But in the process, they get something on the upside. They get to by pounding that narrative, they get to convince a certain number of people. So, the idea that Ukrainians are all Nazis. There are people all around the world that are thinking, "Oh yeah, those Nazis." But where's the evidence? In the Third Reich, you'd say, like, "Where are the Nazis?" And they'd be like, I'm right here, right? That they would self-identify. Where is it now in Ukraine? You don't see that, right? How about NATO? Oh, it's NATO expanding toward our border. Do you know that every Warsaw country left you for NATO? They don't want to, they're just not that into you, right? They fled so that you wouldn't do to them what you're now doing to Ukraine. So I I, I mean, okay, with the exception of like Belarus and Ukraine, but Belarus and Ukraine were absorbed proper, right? Lithuania and the Baltic states were absorbed proper. And that's why they're so hawkish to support, because they know what it's like and they don't want to go back there. But the narrative is, oh well, NATO kept expanding. Or Victoria Nuland. They say Victoria Nuland like that, that ends the argument. You said you were at Maidan, right? So Putin was okay with the Ukrainian government or Russians, depending on how it was, shooting the people. He was okay with that, but he's not okay with him making a deal with the West. He's okay with he's complains about it's a coup, but at the same time, he doesn't talk at all about fomenting the civil war in the eastern part of the country or invading Crimea and having a fake election. But it's a coup, Victoria Nuland, game over. I mean, it's ludicrous.
Victoria Nuland ends all the arguments. It's yeah. Oh my God. I remember after the Maidan, there were still people believing that actually, like, you could buy all those millions of protesters Like you could just pay
Yeah.
them, and like, guys, you don't understand like what it takes to buy all those people. It's amazing when you take a look at pictures from Maidan with like 2 or 3 million people outside.
Hmm.
There's no way you can just, I don't know, send them money like, via telephone or PayPal. It doesn't work like that. And
But
one
it
of
does work exactly as it was described. So go to Robert Cialdini's Influence, Science, and Practice, and he talks about like the reason that people rise up is because they feel like they were making progress, and then the rug was pulled out from under them. It's exactly the scenario that you had at Maidan. And like academically, you could have predicted that this is what was going to happen, and it did happen exactly that way. So I mean, it's a very weak argument there. Every time somebody says that, I say that's really interesting. Can you show me the source, or show me the video, or show me the documents where this coup happened? Show me. Nobody's ever been able to provide nothing even approximating proof, other than saying Victoria Nuland.
Yeah, I remember my commander. So um, I met my commander, like we became acquainted, right, in 2017. But actually, we met in person during the Maidan. I was throwing Molotov at my commander before he became my commander, and he was a police officer on the other side, So
Hmm.
after that, one time we talked, and I said that, yeah, I remember we were there at the Grushevsko Street, and even before that, we were like near the administration of president, and he was like, "Oh my God!" And he goes, "How much did they pay?" I'm like, "Zero." Because it's
Hmm.
impossible to pay all those people. It just doesn't work like that. And he was like, I was convinced. I'm like, why? Because we were told by, uh,
Yep.
there was this position that came to Ukrainian army. It was liquidated, removed, I believe, in like 2015 or maybe a bit later, but it was called like Zampolit. The dude in the army responsible for your political education, which
Hmm.
comes from like Soviet times. And they were basically telling soldiers all that. They were informing them that you see all those people, all those women disassembling the road, taking the cobblestones from the road and things like that, and burning the tires. They're Nazis. And they were like, yeah, yeah, America bought everybody. Like, it's insane. One of the things that, uh, that pro-Russian forces always talk about is like the coup. The coup, according to like to all existing dictionaries, um, it's a process that is conducted by a single force, whether it's a military force, a religious force, whatever force. But it can be a political party, it can be anything. But during the Maidan, the Revolution of Dignity, there were like thousands and thousands of non-government organizations, thousands and thousands of religious organizations, different people, even the churches of like different churches, even the
Hmm.
pro-Russian churches joined the protesters. They supported them, and there wasn't a single force because the result of the Revolution of Dignity was the democratic elections,
Hmm.
and you don't install your I don't know, like your puppet through democratic elections. It doesn't work like that. You just install him through coup, but not like that. Uh, and by the
Ironically, it
way,
was Russia that wanted to invade and have a coup and do exactly the things that they were complaining about in 2014. This is another point with Russian propaganda. They often say that you're doing the thing that they're doing. There's this weird mirroring effect. Like they if you inverse Russian media, Russian propaganda, very often you get something approximating truth. I don't mean that that always works, but very often when you do that, when they say, well, the Americans are doing these biolabs, there might be something going on over there. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying that that's always the case, but very often that's what's happening.
Yeah, the Russians have this game called Durak Sam Durak, which means like you are stupid, no, you are stupid, and basically they project whatever they do themselves at somebody, which is kind of smart, of course, because then you have to uh, uh, prove that dudes actually you are the ones who does that.
Well, children in the United States have a phrase as well. I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you say bounces off of me and sticks to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's a perfect tactical trick, and it often works. But how do you think? How does the Russian propaganda evolve over time? Do you see any developments since 2022?
okay, so let me go back before that. And this goes back to Vlad Vexler that did a masterful job describing how Soviet propaganda worked, and that's different than Russian propaganda. And I was talking to an intelligence officer. I think he's a retired intelligence officer who's now an academic who was talking about, the Berlin Wall fell without a shot being fired. And then we got to talk about Russian propaganda today. Well, how is Russia being so effective? Well, because you now have this mix of a postmodern time where we don't know what we trust or what we believe. And so what they're trying to do is not create a certain narrative that Russia is this, Russia is this, Russia is this. They're trying to just undermine everything that we can possibly believe just by throwing in so many odd stories. And can you really believe that? Did Trump do this? Did Zelensky do that? Did Putin really do that? What about the Nazis here? What about that? And when you're doing that, you're sowing such, it's almost, you start walking through like a funhouse mirror where you can't really see what's real and what's not real, and they're doing that intentionally. And so they're using lies or these falsehoods. There's actually a great article. Look up the Firehood of Falsehood article by the Rand Institute, and this was before the war. I mean, this is how Russia has been doing this for a decade, more than a decade. And but yeah, so they're using these lies to undermine truth. And the response is that you have to use truth to undermine their lies and demonstrate that they're lying in order to undermine them back. It's a weird thing, but falsehood travels faster than truth. Like there are studies about Twitter, for example. On Twitter, if you say something that's true as opposed to something that's lie, the lie will travel 6 times faster. They've done this. There's been academic studies about this. The lie will travel 6 times faster. The more outrageous it is, the faster it goes. And so they have an advantage in that way. But again, an advantage is also a liability because there are advantages that they can lie. The liability is when you lie, you bind yourself because now you can be proven to be a liar. And that's why I'm saying, like when I read the Kiev Post, I don't worry about whether they're making stuff up. I'm constantly on guard whenever I read anything from Russia, right? So, uh, and so when you have a reputation, now the danger is if the Ukrainian government started for a small tactical advantage to lie, then that would undermine their whole position. But because they generally don't do that, I don't see any instances of that. Um, because they don't, then they have credibility, and you can hang your hat on that, which you can't with the Russian side.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't know if that helped answer the question. I kind of wandered around in that, but
yeah, absolutely. We have a comment from Ron who says, yes, Goebbels called the technique the big lie. If you are
Mhm.
going to BS, go big. How do you think do Russians copy paste the Nazi German propaganda of the times of the World War II?
Okay, so you didn't know this, but I did my master's thesis on the Nazis, and I read Goebbels' diaries. Okay, in the process of doing this, and yeah, that's exactly right. He actually found out a formula that you had to have about 30%. Or he was griping in his diaries about how I have to give them like 60% of entertainment in order to get my 30% of propaganda out. Like that's how he thought. right? So he understood what he like, and the Nazis actually gave out a radio with just one station that could be picked up. It was a state station. Like they would give these out for free, so everybody could have these, and they could have their entertainment, but they'd have to swallow the propaganda in the process. So yeah, the idea that you just and this is a summary, but the idea that you tell a lie long enough it becomes truth, that was an idea that he's had as well. But I don't think there's a weakness in there. There's the Achilles heel in there is that if you can just keep pointing out they lied here, they lied here, they lied here, they lied here, they lied here. Is it possible or even probable that what they're saying here is true? Right. So that's the way that I think that you combat that. Because and again, they're masterful at doing this. And what about a month ago we saw that what they were doing in Latin America was they were trying to seed Latin American audiences with their stuff. So they would provide their RT like article and then have it be like a new story from the local press in order to let the local press have all the, it's a lazy way of doing your journalism, but right, they were trying to do it that way rather than this comes from there. And I've seen stories in RT where I cut and paste the whole story, just being suspicious, cut and paste it, put it in Google, and guess what? It showed up in an Arabic website, it showed up in an Indian website, it showed up on an African newspaper website. The entire story exactly cut and paste. They know what they're doing. So yeah, the truth doesn't travel nearly as fast as the lies, but the way to undermine the lies is to prove that they are contemptual, constant liars that you just simply can't trust.
Yeah, I remember last year, was it like Hindustan Digest or something like that? Some newspaper that was showing up every single day in my, list of my media for some reason, and there were things like Russians tested their super sophisticated spaceship against Ukrainian Nazi troops and killed like 1 million people, and it was like every day. I tried to block it as much as I could, but I just failed. And then it disappeared somehow. But Hindustan Times, was it like Hindustan Times or Hindustan Digest, something like that? It
Yeah.
was crazy.
So
It
so
wasn't.
you asked me what was the craziest thing I saw. What's the craziest thing you've seen?
The craziest thing I've seen is this video. It's not fake. Okay, it's just a video showing cringy Russians in a church. People usually hate me when I play this video, but I think I gotta do it one more time, guys.
Go ahead.
Русская душа, пробудись, 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 русская душа. О, просыпайся, о, просыпайся, о, просыпайся, Дева России. Мы берем, Господь, эту взлетную полосу. Мы поднимаемся в небеса Твоими баллистическими ракетами. Мы поднимаемся туда Твоими, Господь, самолетами сверхзвуковыми.
Wow.
Like for the 100th time, it doesn't seem as funny as previously, yeah, but still cracks me up. It's I'm just amazed how how much they militarize their society, and
Yep.
they consider this like normal thing.
So the Russians have clearly, I use the term that they've re-Sovietized, and I don't mean that in the Marxist way. I mean that in the authoritarian way, where the freedoms have been curtailed in many different spheres. And 90 of the 110 or so monuments to Stalin have gone up since Putin came into power. Like that's really telling. And they kind of pine for the good old days with that, not realizing the good old days were costing you tens of millions of your own people being murdered. So yeah, it's a very bizarre thing to watch. I mean, but if you control that, if you can control all the media and all the church and the army and the this and that and education and whatever else, well, you can kind of go on where you want. But again, the danger is also in the upside. You can also run off a cliff much faster, right? So that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, I like this Russian habit of rewriting history. You know, when
Mhm.
Putin says, yes, Stalin unfortunately murdered a lot of Russian people. We should make sure it doesn't happen in our country anymore. And at the same time, Putin was the one who jailed almost 3,200 political opponents in Russia.
Mhm.
And basically, he does the same thing. And Stalin, there are icons of Stalin in like Russian churches. The
Mhm.
Russian church uh, that belongs to their Ministry of Defense, it's called something like Central Temple of the Ministry of Defense, something like that. They actually have Stalin on the icon, and people worship and the craziest thing that Stalin was actually the one who destroyed like thousands of churches and eliminated thousands, if not hundreds of
Yep.
thousands of clerics and priests, and it was insane. But today they brainwashed people so much for generations that they
Mhm.
consider Stalin basically a holy man.
Yeah, well, what other information or access to information do you have to see a different perspective? And so they've been so beat down. So there was a one of my viewers said something I thought was great. I shared it with you last time we talked, and it was that while Russians are serfs, Ukrainians are Cossacks. And I thought, oh, wow, that's a really great way of defining the difference between the two, because since 1991, they've just really split and gone very different directions, one very independent and one doubling down on the authoritarianism, like going right back into that same hole. And so if you're in that hole, you know, watch 1420, and they're very often asked a pointed question. They're like, I don't want to answer that. Well, yeah, there's a reason why you don't want to answer that. Look, if you say anything against a special military operation, that's what they call it in Russia, you can go to jail. If Anna said something against the war in Ukraine, would anything happen to her? Nothing
Uh,
legally. I mean, some people
yeah,
might like disagree with her, but they would ask why, but nothing, there wouldn't be this kind of, so if you have to have those extreme measures, it's because you're scared. It's because you don't believe that it will hold up if you allow it to be just tested by reality all around you. So that, I mean, that's the way you need to think and process about the difference between the two systems.
yeah. The difference is if you go on a street in Moscow and you literally say the war should stop. Next day you
Right.
wake up in jail, and next day you wake up in Ukraine and you're dead. But if you do the same thing in Ukraine, you go, the war should stop. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
correct.
I agree.
Exactly. Like pro-Russian supporters on the West, they don't realize that we are not fighting because we love the war. It's because we want it to stop, because we want to defend ourselves. And war profiteers. I personally, I don't believe in war profiteering much because war never brings profit.
Mhm.
Like, no, it doesn't work like that. War never brings economic profit.
No, it's
It's
always
just a lie.
destroying each other as much as you can until one has to give. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. I remember in 2022, Russian propaganda that was strong, but I think that in 2022, at least in the first part of the year, we actually won the information warfare against Russians, and Russian propaganda was aimed at providing the justification for their invasion,
Mhm.
like mosquitoes, the genetically modified birds,
Mhm.
dogs hunting Russian people, Jewish Nazi president, and things like that. But what do you see? I mean, how did their propaganda changed in 2023, looking back?
It became more bold-faced, but I don't know that it changed a lot over time. But their met so the language didn't change, but the methods have. They've been far more interested in using surrogates to get the message out than they were from just standard channels. There was one report that I read where they even in I think it was a France 24, they got into the French Le Monde I could have my facts wrong about which paper, but a French newspaper, and then they altered one page and kept the rest of all the other links to everywhere else. So it looked like you were just reading an article from that paper, but it was full of not Nazi, Russian propaganda points that were, saying that, see, the Nazi Ukrainians or blah blah blah, but they soft pedal it just enough to make it look like it came from the newspaper, and that's a very tricky method. But again, you can tell who the bad guys are, but by how they act. Do they have to trick you in order to get their point? Do they have to launder their information points through someone else? It's kind of like looking at the war and saying, okay, who are the good guys? The guys that uphold human rights when they capture the enemy, or the guys that kill them or rape or whatever else, right? You can tell pretty easily. So if you have to use these trickery methods, I don't know that I think that's speaking to which side of the fence you're on in a pretty clear way.
Yeah. Why there are pro-Russian supporters on the West? I mean, yeah, of course, we know about the Russian propaganda. We know that it's effective, unfortunately, but how does it work on the Western people?
Yeah. So I think you're already inclined, this is just human nature. You're already inclined to believe what you already want to see. And then people will amplify that. I think social media has been terrible. It's a double-edged sword, but it cuts worse in the bad direction, I think. Like, it amplifies lies very easily. You can find your own echo chamber. And I think that's part of it. I think there's um not just that people want to believe what they already believe, but then they get the social proof from these other people who are saying these things. And in some ways, they're set to believe this because they distrust mainstream media. So they've gone to other sources, or, um, you know, I was showing in one video this morning, because I was talking about what was going on in Washington and trying to unpack that. I was showing a video from the Kyiv Post and then some charts. And I was showing how in 2015, Republicans were actually more hawkish against Russia. By 2018, that had shifted the other direction. One of my viewers, so this thought hasn't fully baked, so it shouldn't come out of the oven yet. But one of my viewers asked a question about that and said, I wonder if the Trump collusion, or the Russia Trump collusion thing, is what might have put off some Republicans in that. But that would also be perhaps the same factor that would cause Democrats to go more anti-Russia, because Trump's bad, so Russia must be bad because they're in cahoots, or that's how they would see it. And so there's this like weird mixture of these things moving that direction. But I still don't understand at what point the Russians became the good guys. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, it's a very mixed bag. And if you want to see that video, that was just this morning, talking about that and just trying to make sense of what's going on in Congress. By the way, I believe that they're going to make a deal. They're just going through their political machinations right now. It's not that they're not going to do it, but unfortunately, they're doing it while you guys are up against the wall and need it. And it's terrible. I wish they'd get it done, but they'll get it done. I believe they'll get it done.
Yeah, I believe that one way or another, you still have to have some kind of agreement. This is how politics work, right?
Mhm.
You have to agree with your opponent if you both have the same goal.
Mhm.
If you want to achieve this goal, you have to work as a team, one way or another. So it's a normal process. Yes, it's like bad, but this is democracy, guys. This is how it works.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you need to understand that that is how democracy works. It's a messy thing. The scariest day in my life watching politics was on 9/11 or 9/12 at night. The congressmen were out on the building. They made some statement and then they spontaneously joined together in singing God Bless America. I was creeped out because they're, a week earlier, they're calling each other every name you can possibly call it. That's the normal way when you have freedom, that things are supposed to work. But when they're unified, locking arms, singing God Bless America, that was terrifying, because that meant that they had a terrible threat that they had to deal with. And yeah, so they'll work it out. I wish they didn't do it the way that they're doing it, but I also want them to have freedom. And this is part of the package of freedom, unfortunately, and it'll get to you. I'm sure as I'm sitting here, they'll work something out.
Yeah, let's hope it happens. I remember same thing happened basically in Ukraine for since 2014 until 2022, when our politicians would like beat the hell out of each other in the parliament and
Hmm.
call their give them names and stuff, and uh, eventually the big invasion started, and yeah, now we're united. It's a good, like, to me personally, it's a good thing, it's a great thing, but at the same time we understand what price we are paying to be
Yeah.
united, because it's horrifying actually what happens right now to different people and cities and whole oblasts in Ukraine being bombed and shelled. And I'm really really glad that we have the unity and we still preserve this unity. But Russians plan to destroy unity within Europe. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you have Orban easily. He's kind of your go-to guy. Then you have well, Slovakia became a backup. Serbia is the backup to the backup, um, and so there's a number of ways that they can destroy whatever the EU might be able to do, of either letting them into NATO or letting them into the EU or aid packages or whatever. But the countries can still work independently or be directed to give, and then Orban still doesn't. But there ought to be some way of punishing him for being the pariah that he is, like at a time of such desperate need. But yeah, Putin clearly wants to break up that unity. There's a great strength in that unity, but there's also weakness in unity, and that's, you have to stick together. And yeah, so but that is his goal. I think Putin benefited more than about anybody else on the planet from the October 7th attack in Israel. Uh, what happened in Venezuela yesterday could very well benefit Putin. I'm still keeping my eye on Serbia and something kicking off there, which almost kicked off about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Uh, Taiwan and China. I mean, I don't envision World War III, but Putin has every incentive to inflame conflicts around the world in order to keep people's eyes off Ukraine. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that behind the scenes there's some machinations going on. I can't prove this. I'm telling you right up front, I can't prove that. But as far as I can tell, there's some things going on that are helping to inflame other conflicts. If you look at RT, for example, just as one example, since that happened, it's almost hard to find articles about Ukraine on RT. It's like I counted it at some points a few times, and it was like 8 to 2 articles about Gaza and Israel as opposed to Ukraine in RT. Like what's going on? They want to keep the attention over there. So
It tells a lot actually,
yeah,
because when RT starts publishing more reports on Gaza and Israel instead of Ukraine, there is a reason behind that
yep,
actually. And in Russia, in Russian media field, nothing happens like for no reason. Everything is planned. And I remember last year there was this Russian TV host, that showed this banner like she's against
mhm,
the war must stop, and yada yada, like on live on the Russian television, and people were like, yeah, like, guys, nothing happens accidentally on the Russian television. Trust me. They are, unfortunately, they are too smart for that stuff to happen. And like, do you even imagine an employee bringing a big banner to the studio, and everybody were like, "What does she do? I don't know. It happens all the time." Uh, Guys, they are so cunning, but this is how they survive, and this is how they keep being the last empire on Earth. Professor, what can you tell us about the counter propaganda? Because we receive a lot of questions what to do to stop propaganda
Yeah.
on the level of let's uh, split this question in three levels. What can we do on the level of government and decision makers? What can we do on the level of influencers? What can we do on the level of internet users?
Yeah. So I'm going to plead ignorance on the top level of government decision makers because I haven't thought through it enough to be able to explain it. So, but as far as the second ones, when you're looking at propaganda dealing with this opinion makers, you have to keep challenging what is being said and show that it's and undermine lies with the truth and continually show that this is underlined. Like how many times has McGregor said that it was all over? Like, I mean, how many videos do you see what the title says? Doug McGregor says it's all over, right? I mean, you have to keep showing that. It would be a great video just to see every time that he showed that and just show the dates of that. Um, and then with common internet users, you guys have to like inform yourself and then think through what you're listening to and then draw people that are on the fence over to your side. I don't mean the hardened zombie like, oh, it's saying the party line, but people that are on the fence, bring them over, show them these kind of videos. But here's what you look for in a solid source. You look for someone who's humble, someone who uses cites sources, not just says stuff, because anybody can say stuff. You turn on your webcam, you start talking, right? Show the actual sources, triangulate on multiple sources so that you're making sure that you're showing from different sides. And you can actually learn from the other side as well, right? You can learn from what they're saying, like even if that's why did they want to show that, and use these kind of principles of like solid ways of understanding and critical thinking so that you can be informed and then you can answer the question. Don't worry, like even if they're a bot or a troll or someone on the other side, they can still inform you and help you build understanding about why they're trying to project that direction, and use those. Don't be discouraged and share this with people that are like-minded. Keep this uh concept or the issue in front of lawmakers to the degree that you can. Write them, let them know what's going on, let them know what you feel about it. But you can do that. You just have to not just assume, like, don't just listen to me. Don't just listen to Starsky. Listen to a wide range of people that you trust to give you facts. And if they lie to you and they don't correct it, that's a bad sign, like redacted, right? If they got it wrong and they corrected, that's a positive sign, but you want to be a little skeptical, and nobody's ever going to get it perfectly. So again, look for humility and look for some reason that they actually believe what they believe, or some background that will help them think, or like, why should you listen to them? Okay, I hope that helps give some kind of framework.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that, before I post anything, before I repost anything, of course, I check the sources. Of course, I
That's right.
do fact checking, which is important. But sometimes when I wake up in the morning and, half of my brain is still sleeping, I go like, dude, this is fantastic. I just don't check. I repost it on Twitter, and instantly instantly my subscribers go like, dude, what did you do? This is BS. Here's the proof. It's like
Yeah.
this video was made in like 2019. I go, damn it. So it happens to everybody, of course, and
And
this is
YouTube is actually one of the more powerful mechanisms. So Twitter lies spread faster, but people believe things more on video because they saw it with their own eyes. And so that's just like it's the way that human beings work. And so YouTube is playing on, not YouTube is, but they're playing on it through YouTube or through Twitter videos. And so you have to be extra careful when somebody sends, and my viewers will send me a lot of things and say, hey, have you seen this? Or you've thought about that? And so my first step is what you just said, is that I'm going to go and verify that and see what does AP or Reuters or BBC or the Times or whatever, like just see what's being said out there. And then my next step is to see what is RT and TAS and Pravda saying about the same kind of thing. And so if I can verify through legitimate sources, that then I feel like I'm safe. But I'm not trying to be the first one to report something. I'm not trying to be the most the sky is falling. Look at this. It's amazing kind of something. I want to make sure that I'm on solid ground when I talk about something. So that's a good healthy practice.
Yeah. Uh, People mention Instagram full of bots. How do we fight bots, and should we?
I don't know. I tend to leave bots alone when it's very clear you're a troll, and trolls will out themselves very easily, saying like, "I served in the U.S. Army, and from these dates to these dates, and but let me tell you," and then they go right into the Russian talking points, and something you can just tell it's not right. It's almost like when a student cheats because they lifted a line from some paper somewhere, and it's in their voice, and they have terrible grammar, and then this next two lines are beautiful. You're like, that doesn't sound right. So I just leave them alone, um, because why fight with something that's not even there, unless I'm trying to send a larger message to everyone else, and like by what I say. But generally speaking, I leave them alone.
Yeah. And one thing that uh, bugs me for quite a while, actually, is there a sense in communicating with Russian society, Russian people, basically Russian citizens? Is there a way to deliver information to them? Oh, and which is most important, uh, should we do that at all?
I I don't know how to do it, and I don't know that it would make a difference. So I don't think that if you're hoping for an overthrow, an uprising there, I don't think you're going to get it. I think you're like like I said, the difference, the split between Ukraine and Russia was fascinating. Like you already had 2004 and Maidan, and like you, this is the way that you all roll. It's not the way that they are there. They still have this kind of beat down, almost Soviet like kind of. So I wouldn't spend my time on that. I'd spend time on trying to upend it in the West, where unity in the West is critical.
Yeah. Question from Noma. Why does the US media show less about Ukraine since Israel than the RT's 20%?
Yeah, there's only so much time in the news cycle, and so I talked about this the other day. It's after October 7th, CNN went from 8% coverage of Ukraine to 1% coverage of Ukraine, and that's CNN, who was like in your corner, right? But it's just a news cycle crowding things out. Now, when something big happens, Kerch Bridge gets blown up or something like that, it'll be covered. No question about it. Moscow, you have a drone hit the Kremlin again, something like that, it'll get covered. But otherwise, it's just not. And it's just part of the news cycle, and you have to recognize that that's part of the news cycle. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it works. I'm not telling you what I wish it would do. I'm telling you what it is or how it actually works.
Yeah. Dumb Trump asks, why can't Twitter, the child molester, be banned for constantly spreading disinformation slash lies? Which is again a good question. If we know that there's quite a few opinion makers constantly spread the BS, can they be just banned
Yeah, so
legally?
then you got a question of freedom of speech, which Americans, particularly like me, hold very dear. I'm almost an absolutist in that. You have that as opposed to who is going to check the checkers. Like you have a real danger that comes when, like, okay, I know some of you don't want to hear Trump. I get that. But if the Ayatollah is still on Twitter and Putin is still on Twitter and Trump was removed, something's a little weird about that. And so I I want the speech to be there, and I want to be able to destroy it. I've done two videos where Scott Ritter was banned from YouTube and then Jackson Hinkle was banned from YouTube, and I actually said they shouldn't be. But I should also be able to say, these guys are crazy. This is nonsense. See how they're lying. So I should have the speech to be able to do that. And you have to undermine them and work through that. And that's the way that you preserve your own free speech while you attack that. And it's a harder way to go. I mean, I wish we could just get rid of it. But, and not every, by the way, not everybody's going to agree with me. That's okay. You don't have to agree with me. If I said anything else useful, take that and ignore what I just said now. That's okay. We don't have to agree on everything fully for you to benefit from something that I have to say. But I'm very hesitant to go down that path because I don't want to become Russia in the process. Nietzsche talked about whoever fights monsters must be careful that in the process, he does not become one. And when you look into the abyss looks back into you. Yeah, I don't want to become the evil I'm trying to fight. And that's where I land on that myself.
Yeah, because for example, I have absolutely different opinion. I think that it was great, and I celebrated because they lost their channel of communication that Russia spent a lot of money on, actually, like huge funds, because Russians spend a lot of money on promotion for those YouTube channels and yada yada. So, like, to me, it was a small win. But at the same time, I can completely understand that because, I mean, your point of view, because, like, you can take a knife and stab a boxing champion, and then, like, yeah, you can say, yeah, I won, and you will go to jail because you will be a criminal. But you can train hard, dedicate years to training, and become a better champion, and beat him. And same with Russian propaganda.
And good
Uh,
people can disagree about how to go about doing that and still be fully supporting. And I think that's a healthy place for us to be. It's when you all have to be assigned the same opinion that that becomes a problem, right?
yeah, because this is not the way how democracy works, actually. So I agree on that. Uh, okay, guys, I think we can call it a day. And Professor, it was a big pleasure talking to you tonight. Maybe
Good to
there's
see you again.
something, yeah, it was a while actually. Maybe there's something you would like to say to our viewers.
Yeah, I just want you to think through how you process news. Like, don't rely on any one source. Find who is as credible as possible and stay, and then expand, and then expand, and then expand, and try to understand different sources because you'll get different nuances. And just think for yourself. If I say something or Starsky says something, don't just take it because we said it. Prove it. Like as you get into the habit of proving things out, you'll find that you are on much more stable ground. So that's where I would leave you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would also like to say that even if you don't understand why people don't do fact checking, just remember that this is human nature. This is the way we consume information, and especially in the social media, it's a normal thing. We don't check the facts. We don't check the sources whenever we read articles, like usually, because it's natural for us. We're just consumers of the information. But if you want to evolve and make one extra step towards being more educated, this is something you should do. You should question everything and find reliable sources of information. It's it's something that unfortunately we have to do in 21st century when social media are used as combat weapon, when independent media are also used as weapons in the
That's right.
informational warfare.
That's right. There's a hot war, there's an economic war, there's a political war, and there's an informational war. And we can't ignore any of those fronts.
Yeah, and it was like that for thousands of years because even Sun Tzu said that the best victory is not victory on the battlefield, it's when your enemy doesn't want to fight you.
Mm-hmm.
Professor, thank you so much. Dear viewers, thank you for being with us tonight. It was a pleasure. Please subscribe to Dr. Gerdes because he gives a lot of great advices on how to fight Russian propaganda. and how to fight bots and trolls, and you can find all kinds of videos on his channel. There's 1,000 of those videos there, which is amazing. So means I gotta try harder as well. Thank you so much, and as always, be safe. See you later. Take care.